fix that. Anyway, as I said, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm going to talk about the things that I have noticed, having been a writer for decades, having been an editor for decades, having been on Medium for almost 5 years at this point, the kind of things that people are doing wrong with their stories that they can fix. If I work as a writing coach and editor, if you come to me with a story, I'm going to help you fix all these things. That being said, it isn't rocket science. The next best thing to working with me on your individual story in a one-on-one session is for me to walk you through, as I'm doing now, and tell you, these are the kinds of things you have to watch out for, okay? I will tell you very briefly who I am, because I think if you're going to tell people what to do, it's important to establish your credentials. You know, who am I to tell you what to do? So here's my bio. I'm a writer. I've written for everybody from the Funny Times to the New York Times. I've been on the Today Show. I've been on Morning Edition. I've been in 16 Chicken Soup for the Soul collections. So basically, I do know what I'm doing. I have been working with writers for decades to help them make their work better and get their work published. These days, I work with a lot of Medium writers, and the goal with them is to either get their work so that they're good enough to get boosted, or sometimes you get your work good enough so that you publish it first off of Medium, and you make some money there, and then you repost it onto Medium. At this point in time, the kind of story that works for Medium, the kind of thing that gets boosted, is also the kind of thing that's worth money off of Medium. It's the same kind of story you can sell to the New York Times or the Philadelphia Inquirer or Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's used to be that was different, but right now those two things have conjoined. So if you can write a good personal essay or story, or nonfiction story about something that people want to know about, you can get boosted, you can actually make money, you can get a wide readership. And that's what I am here to help people do. Okay, so that's who I am. So basically, if you bring me a story to work with, we take a look at it, and I will tell you, these things are great, these things are working. And I will also tell you, these are the things you need to work on. So we don't have a story in front of us, but I'm going to walk through those things. And the point is, the next time you have a story, before you hit publish, go through this checklist. There are 10 things I'm going to focus on. Go through this checklist and just make sure you have done all you can to make these things as good as they can possibly be. Okay, the first thing is, okay, and I was going to say, one of the things I was going to, if this were a Medium story, the title would be Medium Writers, ! Your story needs work. And the subtitle would be, a writing coach shares the 10 upgrades your Medium story needs before you publish it. So that's where we're coming from. I could end up writing this up as an essay. I tend to write just about everything I do up as an essay. Okay, so you start with the title. And what's interesting about that is, in fact, when you're writing a story, you probably shouldn't start with a title. You should start with getting your first draft down, because it's only after you've kind of written that first draft that you really know what the title should be. So put in just a descriptive title, a descriptive placeholder, subtitle, and then you work on your draft, okay? And the only time that that's not true is sometimes you will come up with just a terrific title. It's so good that you write the essay from that title. You think, okay, here's an amazing title, I'm going to write this essay. Otherwise, what a title has to do is just two things. It has to tell the reader what the story's about, and it has to tell the reader what the tone of the story is. Is this going to be a fun, upbeat story? Is this going to be a sad story? Am I going to laugh? Am I going to cry? Where am I going to be on this? Because that's information the reader needs to know. Okay, those are the only two things the title has to do. The third thing, which it can do and which will make it a much better title if you can pull it off, is it should be interesting, it should be engaging, it should be funny, it should be attention grabbing in an honest way, not a bait clicky way. But if you can add that, if you can be funny and add humor, that draws people in, they like that. So the title of the session that you're at was a funny title, and it got a lot of promotion just because it's a funny title. Avoid using titles that are so vague that the reader has no idea what you're talking about and that they have no idea what they're about to read about. Give us some idea of what the story is going to be about. My most popular post on Medium is called how I found out about the affair. Okay. There's nothing clever about that. There's nothing, but it's a straightforward title. It tells the reader, this is what you're going to read about. The subtitle is Welcome to One of the Worst Days of My Life. And between the title and the subtitle, you know you're going to read about somebody finding out about an affair, which everyone's curious about. But you're also, that the subtitle signals to the reader, this is not me. I'm going to not be wailing in anguish. There's a snarkiness to the welcome to one of the worst days of my life that tells you, you might enjoy this. It might be interesting. It's not going to make you go through hell with me. Okay. So that's my example of a possibly good title that you could consider. Okay. There are a couple of titles that I'm just pulling from other medium writers that I have really enjoyed. Okay. My neighbor fell in love with my husband. Now she's dead and I'm feeding her cat. I mean, how do you not want to read that? It's a lovely title, and it's not only descriptive. You know what you're going to be reading about, but there's funniness and attitude in that. That's by someone named Julie Kingood. Okay. Another title that I just loved was Why Being in an Interracial Couple is Not as Black and White as It Seems. Okay. It doesn't get better than that. That is wordplay that works. And that's by Keziah Jones. Okay. So, you know, your title is not always going to hit that mark, but the thing is, make it as good as you can. And try to at least tell the reader, this is what it's about. This is the kind of tone that we're talking about. If you are writing for publications outside of Medium, and I encourage my writers to do that, you don't have to, there won't be a subheading, so you don't have to worry about a subtitle, because that's a Medium thing. And if you sell a story to the New York Times or the Philadelphia Inquirer or Huffington Post, your editor is probably going to change the title. Editors love changing titles. So it needs to be good enough to get an editor to read it, but you can relax a little bit. But when you're on Medium, you're the one in charge. So you put it up there, and it's got to be as good as it can possibly be, because if you're not running it by an editor, there's going to be able to help you with it. Okay. I'm going to talk about 10 things. The next thing, number 2, is your photo. Don't grab the first photo you see on Unsplash. Do not use a photo you've seen before. Especially if you've seen it a million times before, don't use it. Come up with something different. Again, it's just like the title. What you need from a photo is it has to give the reader some sense of what this thing is going to be about and what the tone is. If the headline, if the title is clear enough, you can play with the photo a little bit. Okay, you can come up with a photo that evokes the tone of the piece without necessarily being about the topic that you're talking about. A trick that I figured out early on, and I use all the time, and I've noticed a lot of other Medium writers use it, is you can use a picture of a dog or a cat. There are a ton of dog and cat pictures on Medium, and you've got these dogs and cats with a range of expressions on their little faces, and people are drawn to dogs and cats. So if you have a piece with a question and you have a dog with a kind of face, that'll work. I saw an article recently by a writer who was talking about how she was a senior who enjoyed living alone, and she had illustrated it with a picture of a cat just sort of lounging in a bed with the covers tucked up to its chin. I mean, obviously the piece was not about a cat, but the tone of that photo was perfect. It was just perfect in terms of the tone she was trying to establish. And it drew you right in because it's adorable. It's a dog or a cat. So when in doubt, you can use a dog or a cat. Can you use your own photos? Absolutely. That'll personalize the piece. But don't just use the same old photo that we've all seen before. And don't use a photo. Okay, I'm going to give you one more example of something you shouldn't do. There was a really nice piece that somebody wrote about. It was a sort of a humor piece about how to be a curmudgeon, and it was kind of tongue in cheek. And it was about how to be that old guy that says, stay off my lawn, kids. And the tone of it was lighthearted, but it was really sort of talking about how when you're an old person, you don't want to fall into that trap. He illustrated it with a photo of a really angry, nasty, scary looking guy. And it was accurate because that was a curmudgeon, but the tone was all off. So I was like, get a picture that has the same lighthearted tone as your piece. Okay, so that's your photo. Okay, the third thing I'm going to talk about that you have to pay attention to is your story's too long. Just about every story on Medium is too long. Just about every story on Medium needs a good line edit. most 7-minute stories are actually 4 or 5-minute stories. So before you hit publish, trim that thing. Get everything out of there that doesn't need to be there. The problem with that is that Medium incentivizes longer posts, because the longer it takes people to read it, the more money you get. On the other hand, if people get bored because they're basically wading through all this padded prose, they're going to bail and they're not going to finish, and you're not going to get paid for that story the way you could. The sweet spot is about 4 to 5 minutes. If we're talking a personal essay, 800 to 1,000 pages, if only, 800 to 1,000 words. That's what you're looking for. If your piece runs longer than that, okay, try to trim it. Obviously, there are pieces that need longer space. And obviously, if you're writing a technical piece or a nonfiction piece, you may need every one of the, 5,000 words you're using up. But for a personal essay, for most Medium posts, you can say what you need to say in a really effective and entertaining way in about 800 to 1,000 words. So go through, and as you get to each line, say to yourself, is this necessary? Could I be doing this in a different way? Okay. The third thing that we're talking about is the introduction to your story. I wrote a piece for Medium called "The Introduction to Your Story is Too Damn Long." And the subtitle was "Get to the Point, People." Okay, I meant every word of that. And in part because Medium incentivizes people to write long so they'll get paid more, people don't seem comfortable just jumping into their story. They want to sort of meander their way in and talk about, they'll do a lot of meta stuff. They'll be like, oh, well, I got up this morning and I didn't know what I was going to write. And then I looked out the window and I saw this bluebird, and then I had some coffee, and then, and then I saw the story by Evelyn Jean Pine. I saw this and I thought, wow, that's an inspirational thing. And therefore I'm going to write this piece. And then, you're in like a page before you even start getting to the story. So on Medium as anywhere else, just jump into the story, put us in the scene. Okay. Don't tell us anything about what happens before the story unless we need to know that in order to understand the story. Okay. You need a very good first line. It shouldn't be this really kind of, look, Ma, I'm writing fancy gimmicky first line, like that'll pull people into the story and then isn't really honest. The rest of the story doesn't follow from it, but wow, that was a kick-ass first line. It needs to be straightforward. It needs to put us somewhere, establish the setting. Where are we? What's happening? Why do we want to keep reading? It's got to be a first line that at least makes us want to keep reading. So don't just toss it off and sort of meander your way into the story. Give some thought to how you want to start this thing to bring people into it. Okay, this is really important. You need to write the way you talk. People think that when they're writing, they have to elevate their prose, they have to say things in a fancy way, they have to drag in lots and lots of metaphors, and that is not true. What you need to do is you need to tell the story the same way you would tell the story to a friend. And very often, I'll say to the writers I'm working with, I'll say a line to them and I'd say that they have written, I'll quote it back to them and say, if you were telling your friend the story, is this the way you'd say it? And the answer is almost always no. And then how would you say it to a friend? And then that's the way you need to write a story. The writing should be exactly the same as the way you talk. That's what people are comfortable with. It should be conversational. Okay. And the thing that goes along with that is metaphors and similes and wordplay and puns. A little of that goes a long way. If you come up with a great pun, you can share it with your reader, but make sure that they will think it's a great pun. Sometimes people, they'll come up with wordplay that only they will understand, and they'll put it in the story, they'll put it in the title, we'll have no idea what they're talking about, or clearly they're just showing off. I think of wordplay as often as mental masturbation. It's amusing you, the writer. It is not amusing your reader. It's off-putting. It's distancing them from what you're trying to do in the story. So just come out and write the way you talk, and you'll be a lot more successful as a writer. Okay, this is number 7. You have to structure your story It needs to have a beginning and a middle and an end. And that is another really totally crucial thing that people on Medium often get wrong. Do not riff. Don't just take a topic, give us 5 minutes of your thoughts about it, and then wander off and expect that we care. Okay? Do not write what I think of as a letter to mom, which is basically you just put down every thought that comes into your head because you figure that if you put that all down and hit publish, people are going to be interested in it. Your mom will be interested in every thought that goes through your head. Readers on Medium are not interested in that. You have to shape a story for them. You have to bring them in, you have to give them something interesting to read, and you have to close it with an ending that feels like an ending. So just don't riff and blather for like 5 minutes and then think, okay, I've done it. People do this sometimes because they have been told by people, experts, you must publish every day. Okay. The thing that you have to realize about that is you must publish on a regular basis so your readers don't lose track of you. It doesn't have to be every day. It can be once a week. Do not publish direct every day. That's not going to serve you. It's not going to serve your readers. Publish on a regular basis, but make whatever you publish as good as it can be, which means shaping it. Don't just give us a bunch of random observations. Build a story, structure a story so that we have a sense of a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when we're done reading it, we know that we've read something, not just a bunch of your thoughts. Part of structuring a story is you have to trim out everything that doesn't serve the story. You don't do this in the first draft. In the first draft, you just get it down. And then when you're shaping the first draft, you say to yourself, what am I really trying to say here? What's the story really about? And then you cut out everything that does not serve that particular narrative. What a lot of writers try to do is they're writing 2 or 3 things at once. They want to bring everything in at once. And that murks it all up. The readers don't know what you're trying to talk about. They lose track of the narrative arc. There's got to be a narrative arc, beginning, middle, end. Figure out what it is you want to say. Trim out everything else. Very often people will come to me and I'll end up saying to them, you're writing 2 different stories here and you're mixing them up. Separate them and make them into 2 essays. Once you say that to them, they often go, oh yeah, you're right. Okay. You can't write everything you need to say in 1 essay. Okay. So focus on what you really want to write. Trim everything out, even if you've come up with a fabulous sentence or a really interesting metaphor, but it doesn't really suit, or you're bringing in some information about, somebody else. You've got to get rid of that. You've got to just serve the story. So trim everything out. Okay, and another thing about metaphors. I guess I've already said a little of that goes a very long way. I was working with a writer recently. She's very good at metaphors. She's just good at it. But she'll put like 12 of them in a paragraph, and it becomes too packed with metaphors. It's very distracting. So use a small number of them. Even if you love them, just come up with a very small number of them that you use, okay? A story is not a deposition. You do not have to be 100% honest. You can shape the facts a little bit. Everybody does. You can leave things out that aren't relevant. Everybody does that. And you don't have to tell us everything that happened. You can leave out a lot of the logistics. You can leave a lot of I crossed the room and I picked up the phone. And it was John. And this is what John said to me. Just basically say, the phone rang, I picked it up. John said, the house is on fire, John said. I mean, whatever. Just put us there with you. Don't tell us, I looked out the window and there was a red car, and the red car stopped and it was in front of the house. And a guy got out of the car and walked up to my front door, and the doorbell. People do this. They include all this irrelevant stuff. So pull out all the irrelevant stuff and start when you open the door and there's whoever it is. Okay. This is number 9. You need to end with some kind of a punch. You can't just trail off. People on Medium do this all the time. They're done and they just trail off into a bunch of random comments. You have to shape this thing. You've got the intro is going to get you into the story, and all you want in the intro is to tell us, set the scene. Where are we? Who are the people? Why do we care about them? What's going to happen? That's the intro. The middle is sort of the heart of your story, and the ending has got to be something that gives us a sense of closure. You don't have to wrap it all up in a bow, but we have to have some sense that this is over. When we come to that last line, we can't think, that's not enough, or, finally, we need to have some sense of, okay, Every once in a while, somebody will just nail their last line. And, what I will do is if I'm reading it, I will give them a little note on Medium saying, you nailed that last line. Because endings are the toughest. Endings are worse than titles. Endings are, even prose, everyone has a hard time nailing an ending. It's a tough thing to pull off. You have to know when to stop your story, and you have to end it. It doesn't have to be a happy ending. You can end it with a question, but the reader has to know that this piece has ended. Okay. You want your last line to be as good as your first line. Again, you don't want it to be contrived, but you want the reader to have some sense of satisfaction when they've gotten to the end of the piece. Okay, this is number 10. I don't think I've been numbering these all along, but your story has to be about something. When your reader's done, you don't want them to think, oh, well, that's 5 minutes of my life I'm never getting back again. And you don't want them to think, well, so what? Who cares? You want them to have some sense like, I'm glad I read that. Okay. And for a story to be really good, it has to be about not just what it's about on the surface, what it's ostensibly about. It also needs to be about something else. So the story, for instance, that I wrote about finding out about the fact that my boyfriend had been cheating on me, how I found out about the affair, it was ostensibly just about that. I did this, and this is what happened. It was also about what love means, what trust means, why relationships work and why they don't, something about human nature. It raises a lot of, now I don't explicitly raise those questions, but when you're reading that piece, those things are coming to mind. There was a story recently by a writer named Jean Ann Feldison, who's someone I work with, who's a very good medium writer. Okay, the title is Memorial Day, the Pandemic, and Mom's Potato Salad, which is another great way to shape a title. Just come up with 3 separate things that take place in your piece and string them all together, and you've got a title. Now, the subtitle gave the reader a better idea of what this thing was actually going to be about. It was on the surface about a woman whose mother had a recipe for potato salad, and the mother lives in a different place than the woman. They're trying to work together on reconstructing this potato salad recipe for Memorial Day because the mom has dementia and the daughter's far away. And the thing about that is, even though on the surface, it's just about, let's reconstruct this recipe so we can use it for Memorial Day. The underlying, it was also about separation and love and loss and family. It was just very moving. But she didn't jump up and down and talk about, love and loss and family. She talked about potato salad, but that message came through loud and clear. So if you can, you want to be writing not just about what you're writing about, but about, there has to be some deeper meaning to it. And it will be there because otherwise you wouldn't want to write about it. Okay. So try to figure out what that is and try to shape your story toward that. You don't have to, underline it and put a lot of bells and whistles around it, but if you can pull that off, it's going to be a better story and more people are going to want to read it. Okay. Those are all pieces of information and advice about how to make your story better. Another thing that's all about how to write a story. There's one last thing, and that's what to write about. And it would seem to be really obvious, but you will not get a lot of readers if you do not write about a topic that a lot of people care about. Okay, people will write about wombats, and why aren't people reading my wombat story? Well, they don't care about wombats. Why aren't they reading my story that I just 5 minutes about my pet lizard? Because people don't really care about lizards. Some people do, but most people don't. If you write about love, you're going to get more readers than if you write about lizards because more people care about love. Okay. So if you want to build a readership and you want to get paid for your work, you've got to write about things that a lot of people are interested in. And for me, that's often love, that's relationships, that's dogs, that's cats. Okay. You might say, I don't want to please the crowd. I want to write about whatever I want to write about. That is great. That's one of the things that Medium's for. Medium's amazing for that. You can write anything you please on Medium. That is the strength of Medium. That is the weakness of Medium. You can write anything you please. And maybe you'll get 10 readers for your story on wombats, and that'll make you happy. What I'm saying to you is don't expect thousands and thousands of readers if you're going to write about something that thousands and thousands of people don't really care about. So you've got to balance those things. Your desire to have a huge readership and your desire to say exactly what you care to say. And you try to find the Venn diagram where those two things intersect and you can actually get a bunch of readers because you want more readers for your work. Okay. And I'm going to close that out by telling you about my most popular story, the story that has done the best. The only story I've ever written that's truly gone viral all over the world is something I wrote for the New York Times. And the title is Old Dog Needs $6,000 Surgery. What do you do? Okay. My editor came up with that title. I'm sure I came up with something more prosaic, and he basically just boiled it down to that. That went all over the world. People are still reading that story, and they're reading it because that's a very good title. But it's also because it's about two things that people care about. They care about dogs and they care about money. And there's also love is mixed into that too. And that's why people want to read something like that. It's about things that people, it's a well-written story. I had a terrific editor, helped me, upgrade it and make it fabulous, slapped a really good title on it. But the heart of that story is people want to know what happened because they care about money, they care about dogs, they care about loving your dog. So that's what I'm leaving you with that idea. What you want to do is write about something that matters to you, but also matters to your audience. Okay. So I think that's it for what I have to say. And that leaves 5 minutes and I don't even know if there's Q&A. Is Q&A available? Can you guys ask me questions? Let me see if I can find this. If not, I have a session at 3, which is nothing but people asking me questions. Okay. Writing about dreams and interpreting them as I write about them. Okay. How to make this more interesting? Well, don't write about dreams, write about one dream. Tell us about one particular dream. People are not interested in other people's dreams by and large. So you have to work hard for that. But if you can make it interesting enough, if you can make your interpretation of the dream interesting enough, people will read about that, and keep it short. People are not going to read a 9-minute post about your dreams. Okay. The dream has to be interesting. Your interpretation has to be interesting. It has to be about something that we care about, and make it shorter. Writing more than one story. Does my advice retrimming your story also apply to? Yes. Yeah. My advice about trimming things and making everything in there serve the narrative applies to every kind of writing. I work with a lot of novelists who end up being published, both by small presses and large presses. We go through, if you're writing a book length piece, you give it a line edit, you go through every single line and you ask, do I need this line? Could I say this line better? Can I drop this out? Is it truly necessary? That applies to every possible kind of writing. Do I have any resources for trimming? Read it to someone else. Do not be by yourself. Read it. Everybody has a potential person in their life who can act as their first reader. Okay. You want honest criticism. Someone saying this is delightful is not honest criticism. You want somebody. It could be, it could be your husband or your wife or your partner. Am I being cut off now? I don't know. Find somebody in your life that can help you with that, or obviously work with a good editor. No, I think I still have a few moments to do that. Okay. Someone says, thanks for these great tips. You're welcome for these great tips. Oh, how to trim a story to the core without losing their soul. Well, that's a great sentence. That's a great descriptive sentence. And no, there's not an easy way to do that. You don't want to write in a closed loop. You don't want to just write yourself and not get anyone in on it. If you can't work with an editor, again, find someone in your life you can run things by. Find an editor who will work as a writer who will work as a writing buddy for you. So you can ask them. You can read it to them. You can say to them, read this. Does this make sense to you? Is there something missing? Is there something I need to add, or is this just right? Or do you understand what I'm trying to do here? You can't write in a vacuum. Nobody writes in a vacuum. Okay. Try to get as much feedback as you can. How do you decide what to keep and what to toss? Again, it's a case-by-case basis. There's no one overall rule. You just, and the other thing about it is the skill that you build up. You don't start playing tennis by being able to play tennis like a pro. You start by just trying to hit the ball, and then you get better and better and better at it. So you have to do it a lot, but you also have to get feedback. Those are the two things you need to do. You do it a lot, and you get feedback about what you're doing. Okay, I think I've hit all the questions that people have asked me. popular, the most popular question. That was me. That was me just trying to figure this system out. Okay. Do headline generators really work? I don't use them. And so I don't know if they really work. So they work for some people if they understand how to use them. I don't think they're necessary. I think it's more fun. I mean, I write for fun. I write because it's fun. It's more fun. It's more interesting if you can come up with your own headline than if you basically hand it over to AI. I think that, AI is going to be writing everything within 5 years. They're going to be writing all the content anyway. I don't want to write with AI because it's less fun for me. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but the more you can do it yourself, the more of accomplishment it is when you pull it off. And the more you can learn from your mistakes. If you just let someone else do it for you, if it's AI or if it's a machine or if it's, I think you're going to learn less. Okay. All right, I think we're done. Again, if you want to reach me, roswarren@gmail.com. And please come back for the 3:00 session if you have any questions you want to ask me then. And I really appreciate everybody who did turning up. Apparently there were 222 of you, which is a nice, now they're 210. So people are filing out of the room. I can sit here and watch people going away, which is pretty entertaining. It says leave. I'm getting a little red thing that says leave. Okay, I can take a hint. Bye-bye. See if I can get to the little thing that says leave. Yep, bye-bye. Do I want to